The Legend Diver. It's been around for almost 20 years, can you believe? 15 years, give or take. And in that time, we have seen many variations, all sorts of different colors, materials, which we will talk about. But listening to the specifications of this new piece, 39 millimeters in diameter, 12.7 millimeters thick, 47 millimeters lug to lug. This sounds too good to be true, right? But no, they have actually done it. And beneath the packaging, COSC chronometer certified silicon balance, 72-hour power reserve, with no date on the dial, which is something we've asked for a very long time, and it even comes on a beads of rice bracelet. This, ladies and gents, is one of the best Longines recreations to date. Not that it's anything new or groundbreaking, it epitomizes refinement, and it shows you with an example like this how important refinement can be to change the entire image of a watch. And no doubt with a size like this, it's going to be incredibly popular and compete with the likes of other more popular names. But beyond that, this piece to me signifies something else, and a sign for what is going to happen from here on out. There is no better indicator that the watch industry at large is paying attention than when Swatch Group starts listening and producing what we have been asking for. Swatch Group is one of those notorious names that collectively produce watches that tend to be on the larger size. They tend to have watches that are generally quite thick in size, their diameters are normally 42 millimeters and up, and they don't really waver. We look at names like Omega, Longines, Blancpain, Breguet in the sports category, and they all have very similar aesthetics. Have you noticed? The majority of their pieces tend to be 41 millimeters in diameter and up. A lot of them have clear exhibition casebacks, which increase their overall thicknesses, which inevitably makes the majority of their sports watches pretty large wearing on the wrist. I think some of the chiefest examples of watches in this department, models like Breguet's new Type 20 or Omega's Planet Ocean. What is a nice change is that Longines as a brand tends to be quite free-flowing. They drive on both lanes of the highway. They don't just stick to the slow lane or the fast lane. They give us large and oversized pieces, but they also can, in a response, give us far more historically accurate designs with far slimmer and well-proportioned profiles. And I think beyond the brilliant model of the 39mm Legend Diver from Longines, this watch directly signifies a move to mid-size. It can no longer be seen as a phase or a fad that many brands have been trying to push towards. This is genuinely a shift in direction for years to come. Now, Longines has had a few years of hits and misses. I think it's a general perception that sometimes their watches can be way off the mark, but then they will inevitably counter with something fantastic. This Legend Diver is the latter. No doubt Longines is a brand that likes to keep us on our toes. With the Legend Diver, a model that has existed for the best part of 15 years, and along this timeline we have seen many different variations of sizes, 42 millimeters being the standard size for the longest time, and if I'm not mistaken, even the original model measured around this size, or very close to it. The watch in all of its style paying tribute to the original reference 7042, which debuted around 1959, and let's cut straight to it, it's striking. When we think of the words skin diver and compressor case, the Legend Diver is right there foremost in your head. It's one of the watches that immediately comes to mind. Then followed closely by a watch like the Enercar Sherpa Super Dive compressor. Look at this thing. Another brilliant design. You can probably see why I love the magic of 1950s and 60s dive watch design. Because they're so out there, they are so different to what we see today, but they're also time capsules. They symbolize the design of the time, they are experimentational. They don't get everything right, but they are the forebearers. And at a time where all of these brands were trying to compete and were desperate to win over the dive watch market, producing anything that they could, it forced these brands to be innovational, to be one step ahead, and to come up with groundbreaking designs a lot of the time. And a watch like the Legend Diver is also a great example of showing you the strength of staying power, of keeping a design consistent. For a model that's been around for nearly 2 decades with a design that is very easy to recognize, Longines has done the right thing by keeping it the same. So we've established that it's well recognized, it's always been a great value for money dive watch. It's also very unique to Longines as a name. It also epitomizes the advancement of late 1950s dive watch design. But for so many who fell for this watch in its 42mm size, they would later discover that it wasn't the easiest watch to wear. Because the nature of these late 50s skin diver cases was that they all had extruded lugs. There is no better example than when we look to Blancpain and the 50 fathoms at the time. A model with a lug-to-lug length that measured in excess of 50 millimeters. even if the case only measured 40 millimeters in diameter. The concept, I believe, for a lot of these, similar to Flieger watches of the mid-1940s, was that the longer lugs would be useful when wearing the strap over dive gear, over a dive suit. And if we look to the case back of the Legend Diver, another great thing of these one-to-one recreations, they haven't changed very much. And here we can see a clear indication of its target market. It in a lot of ways perfectly indicates the definition of a skin diver at that time. Light gear, light wetsuit with long sleeves, obviously spearfishing. So the lug-to-lug of these 42mm models measured 52.4 millimeters, which has always been a point of contention. Some would say the primary drawback as to why people wouldn't own it or wear it. But the design of the Legend Diver deserves praise. A compressor case historically would mean that the case back would tighten the deeper you go. This is technically not a true compressor case in that sense, but the main aesthetic we see are the two crowns and that ability to be able to rotate the inner bezel with an external crown. This was done to protect the bezel from any external interferences, basically. You must remember that at this time, click springs were a real novelty, and unidirectional bezels just didn't exist. This was decades before the time. So for that sake of diver safety and that these were being used as tools, this was quite a good idea. And very much like how Swatch Group approaches a lot of these watches, we see over time how materials have been experimented with. Bronze cases, for example. We've seen how different straps have been implemented. We've also seen how the dials have changed rapidly, using color, using fume and texturing. We also can't ignore that the Legend Diver has been given to us in 36mm, which was a great size. But seeing how this newest edition has been implemented, now that in between, not 42mm or the smaller 36mm, but a substantial 39. That for the first time in a very long time lacks a date complication, that has no faux lume on its dial, where its case and the length of its lugs have been scaled proportionally. We can actually see that the lugs have been played around with quite a lot here. The sharp edges have been taken away, and it feels a lot more true to the original. But then it's the other small things. It's the reworking on the crowns, which is also quite a point of contention. The larger crowns have been replaced with far more period correct looking ones. And I'll say the only thing that I'm missing from this composition, which would make it absolutely perfect for me, is the slightly longer and wider spade style hand, more true to the original. It is very Tudor Ranger in design, and I wouldn't be surprised if they used the exact same parts bin back in the 50s. And then it's looking closer to how the mid-size watch has begun to dominate all the major players in the industry. In recent years, we can see a more clairvoyant direction of looking to 36mm, 37mm, and that sweet spot of 39. I've said this many times before, that if you have a watch that even looks like a dog's breakfast, you play with its proportions and its size, it makes a world of difference. And so often in this game, when I talk about the design of a watch, and I say that they have missed the boat on that 5%, that remaining 5% to make it absolutely spot on. This Legend Diver, as an example, shows you what full dedication looks like. Not only is it paying tribute to a vintage design, which is nice, but they are looking at it under a microscope and scrutinizing and improving it across all areas. From the details of the crowns, to the newly refined case that has a lot more flow, a lot more elegance, to the profile of the watch, to its overall slimness, to the balance on the dial, the text placement, the bezel size. And of course, let's not ignore the beads of rice bracelet, which gives it a far more elegant leg up. All the while, Longines continues to deliver on the ETA movement, now COSC chronometer certified with a huge power reserve, and everything that the modern watch wearer wants. So the Legend Diver in 39mm symbolizes many things. A sign of the times, an assurance of quality in build, and a real example of how excellent a slightly smaller size can be. Not only having a stronger focus on the negative space, its proportions, and how it will wear on a majority of wrists, but also how every other area will improve because of these small changes. If you need an example of a watch that understands the brief to the latter, this is that watch. So I have no doubt that the Legend Diver is going to be on the map for a lot of people. It's the simplicity that matters at the end of the day. That is something that so many brands I don't think fully grasp, is that we don't necessarily want huge innovations. We just want it done correctly. And this is at the very root of a video that I'm making on Omega's Planet Ocean that should be out next week. When simplicity, elegance, scale, proportions, profile, when it's all addressed correctly, the watch is unstoppable. Plain and simple. And there are thousands of real-world examples to prove that point. This is just one of them. So thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video. See you in the next one.